Hey, this is Nick Moke for Digital Trends, and the iPad has finally arrived. We've had a few days to actually play with these things. You can read our in-depth impressions in the written review that we have up on digitaltrends.com, but we wanted to take the opportunity to walk you through a sort of general overview of our impression of this device in this video. So let's take a look at some of the impressive functions the iPad has to offer. So some first impressions, right off the bat, the iPad is actually a little bit heavier than we thought it would be. Obviously, it's 1.5 pounds. That's very light by laptop standards. But when you actually heft this thing, because it's quite a bit smaller, it's much more dense. And to us, it actually felt pretty heavy and a little bit, tiresome to hold after a while, especially in the portrait configuration. Obviously, it is very dense and it feels very well built. It's definitely up to Apple's build quality standards. This one uses an IPS screen. The iPad uses an IPS LCD screen, which is actually a different technology than the twisted pneumatic technology that is found in most generic LCD screens, most big screen TVs, that kind of thing. The big deal there is that it has a very good viewing angle. You can see as I tilt it back and forth, you really don't get the kind of distortion that you get with a cheaper LCD screen, which is nice for viewing this from multiple angles. You don't have to view it dead on, and you can also do things like view a movie with somebody else or show them a web page without having to put the iPad actually in their hands. You can tilt it. Otherwise, it's actually a very comfortable device to hold. The bezel here was kind of controversial. I remember when they announced it, a lot of people criticized it, but it does make it much easier to hold. Your fingertips don't actually have to touch the touchscreen if they curl over the edges, which is definitely very convenient. And you can see here, obviously, it's running the iPhone OS, which is very intuitive and, to most people, very familiar. The one thing that we were worried about is the keyboard. So the issue with the keyboard here is that it's a little bit hard to use when you're holding it from the portrait direction here. So I can sort of get to most of the letters, but I'm sort of straining to get to the stuff in the middle here. So ideally I would really be holding the iPad like this, but as you can see, my thumbs don't really reach those letters. I kind of have to hold it a little more uncomfortably in my fingers rather than my palms to actually be able to type comfortably when holding it this way. And the other problem is, if you tilt it this way, it's also gigantic, but the problem is actually magnified. And you can put it in your lap this way, and it's actually, almost the size of a laptop key. But because it's not angled at all, it feels awkward. It almost feels as if the iPad is going to slide out of your lap. So for hardcore typing, you might have some issues on this. It's not going to be nearly as comfortable, say, to type out, a longer email on your iPad as it is to just break out your laptop. So as promised, the browsing experience on the iPad is absolutely stellar. It's extremely responsive to touch. I mean, there's really literally no lag time when you're actually using your fingers to do the multi-touch pinch and zoom. It's also, Safari on this thing is extremely fast. It loads things just as fast as we think a laptop would. And again, the formatting is perfect. This isn't the sort of mobile browsing experience of 2 or 3 years ago where everything looks kind of crazy. It looks exactly as good or better than you would find it on a laptop. And again, it's so easy to zoom in, and just a really slick browsing experience. Now, the only hiccup in that is obviously still no Flash. So if there's pages that you regularly visit that make heavy use of Flash, you are going to be missing a significant piece of the web on the iPad. That said, if adoption of this device is broad enough, we might see more sites moving over to HTML5, like YouTube has produced a beta of that, which would lead to more people abandoning Flash and making sort of iPad-friendly versions of their sites. So as Apple has promised, the ebook experience on here is actually pretty impressive. What we're looking at here is the top charts in the iTunes bookstore. On the right we have free books, on the left we have top paid books, which range from $4.99 here all the way up to $12.99. So maybe not the best deal in the bookstore, but you can see there's quite a few free titles as well. Alice in Wonderland, The Art of War, Huckleberry Finn. If I go back to the library here, you can see that we have a book in here, Winnie the Pooh. And the actual reading experience is very slick. Obviously it exactly resembles an actual book, and even the experience of turning a page has been pretty fine-tuned by Apple to feel like the real thing. You can see as I go here, the page follows my finger and it actually warps with my finger to create a realistic page turning experience. You can even see that the page I'm turning over, you can slightly see through it from the back. All very unnecessary, but all very beautiful too. That's the book reading experience. Obviously, the issue here is, although the color artwork and stuff is a lot more impressive than what you would get from a e-reader like the Amazon Kindle, we definitely found that when reading at night or for long periods, the LCD screen really doesn't measure up to actual e-ink in terms of being easy on the eyes. So, you know, this is great if you want to take in a few pages of Winnie the Pooh on the bus, but if you want to, you know, take in long books the same way you would on paper, you know, I don't know if the LCD is really going to be as compelling as the e-ink on something like the Kindle. Now, the flip side of that is, of course, magazines, which never really look that great on the Kindle. And you'll see here with GQ's app here that magazines look absolutely amazing on the iPad. This little scroll bar on the bottom here takes me through different pages, almost as if I'm thumbing through it, and I can sort of see different things as they come up. So here we have a grooming article, and clicking on anything will bring it up. You keep the art that goes with the article on the top, and you get to sort of scroll through here on the bottom. Just a really slick app, and this seems to be the status quo for the iPad magazine apps. And this whole experience is just really polished, really compelling, and I think that hopes of actually sort of reviving the print industry with the iPad may not be as overblown as we may have expected, because this really is a very, very sleek experience. So even if you do consider the iPad just an oversized iPod Touch, there are a few instances where bigger really is a lot better. And I think gaming is definitely one of them. We've had a chance to play quite a few games on here, and all of them are considerably more fun and easy to play than on the smaller equivalent. This is Dungeon Hunter, which is pretty much a sort of Diablo ripoff. You can see here, it's actually loading fairly quickly considering how intense the game is when we get it started here. But it's a full 3D game. It's something that I don't think would have worked very well on the iPod, but when we get it open on here, it's actually quite an impressive game. And it reminded, you know, at points when I was playing this, I almost felt as if I were on a PC. The screen is enough to sort of give you that immersive experience. So when we get it open here, the controls for this particular game, and for a lot of the games that we've seen, obviously use thumbs. And you can see the graphics are, I mean, if you look at the waterfall, pretty good looking. This is comparable to what you were doing on PCs not that long ago. And again, a fun game, an immersive game, and something that we wouldn't want to play this type of game with this much depth on a smaller screen. And the quality of gaming on the iPad really is quite stellar. Now, unfortunately, one of the things I would point out is that for some of these darker games, you really start to notice the glare of the iPad screen. It's obviously a glossy screen, much like the iPhone, iPod, or even a MacBook. And if you're sitting near a light source, an overhead light source, or obviously if you're outside, it catches a lot of glare. And if you get into some of the darker environments, in this game in particular, it really starts to be a pretty big pain. So one of the things that the iPad is definitely not that great at is viewability in all conditions. So, you know, obviously we haven't touched on all the points that make the iPad what it is, but I think we've given you a brief overview, and the iPad is really a very compelling device. You know, I was very skeptical when I first approached it. It does very much seem like an oversized iPod Touch, but it really is a form factor that brings something new to it. And I think that a lot of people will probably find themselves using the iPad in a lot of situations where they used to use a laptop, and it'll probably find its niche that way. And of course, as with the iPhone and the iPod Touch, apps are what really make this platform what it is. And I think as we continue to see developers embrace what we have here, now that they can actually get their hands on a hard unit, I think we're going to see some really impressive apps developed for the iPad, and I think it is going to be a pretty successful piece of hardware. The price is obviously a bit of a sticking point when you can't get one for under $500, but that's another thing that, of course, with the next generation will probably drop down. And I think the iPad is probably here to stay, and if you have the cash to pick one up, and you know, you don't mind spending $500 for what's basically a novelty, an awesome novelty, but a fun device, a leisure device, would definitely recommend picking one up.